Today we speak with Deb Calvert, founder of the Sales Experts channel and president of People First Productivity Solutions. Deb authored Discover Questions and Stop Selling and Start Leading, and is a certified sales and executive coach. She's one of the 65 most influential women in business, a top 30 global sales guru, and an inductee into the Sales Hall of Fame. Deb, welcome to the show. I'm really delighted. It's the second time we are talking, and on a show, I have spoken to you many times, and every time I have gone back with knowledge which I didn't have before that. So I'm looking forward to a very stimulating discussion today.
Well, that goes both ways, Subhanj. And every time we talk, I also have so many ideas that come from our conversations, and I've really enjoyed all these opportunities.
Thank you so much. So before we dive in, talk a bit about the work you are doing currently. You are actually helping companies across the world in multiple geographies and multiple industries. And just tell us a bit about what you are doing currently.
Yeah, in sales, I am a buyer side researcher. So whenever I work with clients or do some teaching at various universities or have opportunities to engage in any way, my focus is usually on gathering data and information. And I think that's somewhat unique. I think the other thing that's a bit unique is that I'm not a specialist in a very narrow field other than connecting people, buyers and sellers, leaders and followers, team members to each other. And that surprises people. It seems more like a soft skill, but then you back it with hard research. And I think it gives us some important insights when we look at both.
Yeah, this is fascinating. And it's very close to my heart, what you do. And which is why I think I take away more than possibly most people when they're talking to you, because I'm really looking for it. The reason we started this series is because I thought we are too entrenched in the way we sell. And this is a purely a seller side perspective. I'm not talking about the buyer here at all. I'm saying that the way we are selling is not keeping pace, and the result is this elephant in the room, which is an abysmally low conversion rate from lead to close. And I have a very simple question to you, Deb. What got us here?
Oh, so many different things. And so let me offer a few ideas about that. One of them is that we've been measuring the wrong things. And when you're measuring, for example, number of calls, you're incentivizing the wrong behavior. You are causing people to only value the number of conversations, not the effectiveness of those conversations. So the metrics and what we value in selling, we've lost sight as we've had new tools and we've had new opportunities and we've had new enablements. We have lost sight of what really, really matters. And that is ultimately helping the buyer, which is a conversion. I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is that we misunderstand from the buyer's perspective what's really happening in our conversations with them. And if you'll allow me to take a tangent here, I think this is significant. Right now, in the past year, we have all been experiencing more and more information overload, infobesity. Right? It just is so much that we can't deal with it, and it's no longer healthy. And yet, because we are in front of our computers, because we aren't traveling, because we aren't socializing, we put a pressure even on ourselves to take in more and more information. The problem is, nobody can really do that. Cognitive overload is real. Now, what does this have to do with selling? Well, your buyers are experiencing the very same thing. Too much information, too much conflicting information, and no one helping them make sense of all that information. So I'm very, very interested in the research being done by Gartner around sense making and selling, not being a teller, not being a giver of information, but being the person who helps the buyer sort out all the information, methodically, slowly, in a way that truly adds value. And that leads to more conversions. See, buyers are going dark because they're overwhelmed. And buyers are commoditizing and making decisions on price alone because that's a coping mechanism. That's just how they are stripping everything else out and finding one thing that simplifies their decisions to their own detriment. So I think all these reasons, but that last one has really enamored me lately. And I'm working with now 2 clients and really seeing that have a lot of value.
I think this makes total sense because we thought that the solution is to give more information. So one of the roles of becoming an advisory to, or a trusted advisor is what the term we use to the customer, is to supply them with information which they would find useful in the decision making process. So that was the hypothesis, right? The
Yes.
unfortunate part is all the 5 vendors vying for that account is doing the same thing. And some of these are conflicting, some of these are truncated, so some of these are not complete information, and so on and so forth. And the buyer, as you rightly pointed out, is having a tough time not only making sense of all this, but also making sense of the veracity of all the information that he's getting.
Yes, maybe not comparing apples to apples, but they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And we're coming from a position of a lot of knowledge about our own products, industry, and we might give them too much in a very pure effort. We're trying to help, but we're not helping. We're hurting them, we're hurting ourselves because they can't absorb it all. It's impossible.
Very interesting. Let me go back to the first thing you mentioned about metrics, measuring the wrong metrics, right? Who is at fault here? Who is responsible of setting the metrics? And how long can we say that the SDR is really doing a bad job?
Yeah, 2 very good questions. Who's at fault is whoever has the ultimate control over those metrics. They get driven by all the wrong things. So here again, we're going to assume good intent. But sales managers, sales directors, VPs, they hear a certain story from a vendor. Let's say it's the latest, greatest new technology or enablement. And that company, self-serving, because we all are, right? But they say you should measure this, and then you can get this. And then they hyper-focus on that one thing based on the promise of the big investment that they made, without thinking about the implications and the unintended consequences on the overall relationships, brand, and sales effectiveness that they're going to have. So I always use that caution when there's any sort of new tool or technology. There's no magic bullet. There's no one thing that's going to do it all.
Yeah.
So that's driving it. I think the other driver is, in many places, desperation. Sales numbers aren't where they used to be. Quotas are more and more difficult to reach. We see every year lower numbers of salespeople actually reaching their quotas. And so that desperation promotes the hyperfocus, promotes the wrong attention. It puts results above the right way to get results. You think short term instead of long term, and you lose.
Quick question here. Do you see the behavior on this quota? Because I want to come back to this quota thing, because I think this is something we need to talk about. Do you see a behavioral difference between the listed companies and non-listed companies? Is it that because you have to do this investor calls every quarter, you are more focused on the quarterly numbers vis-a-vis those who are not? Is there a difference, or is it like across the board?
I think there is some across the board, but I absolutely do see more of that sort of desperate short-term thinking in companies that have to produce reports, and especially any of those who have now a focus on selling themselves or meeting the VC needs or something else. The more of those pressures there are on short-term performance, the less building there is for long-term sustainable interactions with customers, and it does take away from the spirit of what you're trying to do and the results that you can get long-term.
This is also resulting in a very, very low tenure for VP of sales. So I believe it's down to 17 or 18 months now. So obviously,
Yes.
I can understand the motivation of the VC, because the VC is wanting an exit. He wants the multipliers to be showing so that he can offload it to either the public market or to a P firm or whatever at high multiples. And then he doesn't care. But the folks who are running the company, who are owning the company, who are the founders and so on, they have to be able to resist it. And why do you think they are not able to do that?
Well, they have a financial stake in it as well. They have an obligation, and they may not fully understand the implications. We are so driven societally to look at the short term. And sales has always been about short term anyway. You've got your quota this month or this quarter, and now it cycles, well, what have you done for me lately is all that we look at. And the even companies with long-term sales cycles, the products they sell require a longer-term sales cycle. Even there's a pressure, and I think it's a bit of an artificial pressure for that short-term performance. So buyers, they may not fully understand who owns, who influences, who affects what's happening in sales, but they sense it from the seller in that desperation. And so I think that there's even some resistance on the part of buyers, and it's a negative effect for the brand of a company long term.
Right. Let's move to this quota. So I can understand, say 50, 60, 70 years back, when we were starting the manufacturing revolution and we were having this assembly line ability to really churn out the same product, 100,000 of them and so on. I can sort of get a sense of, oh, you need to sell out 5,000 pieces this month because next month we'll produce another 100,000, right? I understand the concept of quota. I mean, with the little knowledge that I have, what is it doing today? How scientifically are these quotas set? How arbit is it? I mean, I have spoken to a lot of salespeople who said, if I make my quota, my manager is going to come and say, this month you do 10% more. It's that arbit. If I have not done my quota, he will say, you need to still do 10% more than what you have done, and so on and so forth. So this sort of comes back again and again in various conversations. And my question to you is, with the vantage sort of point from which you look at sales leaders, you talk to sales leaders, and you actually work with them, how scientific is this quota business?
Yeah, I think not at all. Now, most sales leaders will tell you that they've got the formula and they've figured out the way. But where I dispute that is that if that's true, right, they say when you really, really know something, you should be able to explain it to a 5-year-old, but they can't even explain it to their own sellers. And so it feels to salespeople like it's arbitrary. It changes frequently. There are unfairnesses in most systems that anyone could plainly recognize. Like if you're the top seller, Subhanjan, and you brought in $100,000 last week, and I'm new and I'm the lowest one on the totem pole, and I brought in only 10,000 last week, well, why do we both have to have a 10% gain next week? That's inherently unfair. What you're asking of me is so much less than what's being asked of you. So I mean, that's a very simplistic example. That's not true everywhere, but I have seen it even recently, where the thinking doesn't go beyond even something that basic. What I don't understand is why there aren't more scholarly, researched, proven formulas that should be a blueprint for if you are in this industry or this level of selling, or this. There should be some common denominators. Then this is a formula that is proven to work over and over and over again, not just a theory, not just adapted for this company, this team, this year.
Yeah.
It's all over the board, and I don't think that makes sense.
Why do you think we are not talking about it enough? Because I would not, I have met some really very knowledgeable sales leaders, right? So I don't for a moment believe that, oh, we are just trigger happy guys, and we are just extroverts who don't think much, and we are just trying to have a good time while we're I mean, these are all like a 80-year-old picture, right? Even if it was true at all ever. But there are a lot of thinking people, but you look at all the events and webinars and such gatherings that are happening, and we are not talking about these very fundamental issues that are impacting the profession, right? Because I truly believe that sales is the engine of the economy. No sales, no business, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it partly is that sales and finance don't often partner well together. And you see that even in things like commission pay or contract pricing, that finance doesn't always have an active role. Well, here's the value of finance to people in sales. They know the analysis. They can do the numbers piece of it that often even senior sales leaders don't feel entirely comfortable doing. And I don't mean to cast aspersions here, but let's just face it. A lot of sales leaders come up from the sales side of the organization, and they aren't always recognized for, rewarded, getting extra learning and training in financial analysis. They go more by their gut. They rely on their soft skills and their people connection skills. And I've talked to many. This is a very vulnerable thing to admit, but I've talked to people in senior sales leader roles who have flat out said, I'm not really an analyst. I don't really like numbers. I got the commission. I got the basics here, but if they don't know how to do the analysis, and if they're not comfortable and they don't have time, that's one reason why they're not doing it. Then we've got that everybody has a bit of an aversion to sharing this information outside of their own organization. They don't want to share information about their system, their process, their data. So it becomes harder to run cross comparisons and to understand what works and why.
Yeah. The other thing that potentially is linked, but we need not get into the details of it today, is the way the only incentivized role is the sales role. Everybody is doing the same job. Why would you single out one silo of the operation and say, hey, you know what? If you do your job, you get paid more?
Well, we don't have to build on it, but I will say I've been paying a lot of attention lately to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in sellers. And the ones who come in and really want to help their buyers, and they have a thought that selling is going to help them, feel good about the work that they do, and then they start getting commission pressures and incentives, extrinsic motivation, it takes away from the intrinsic. And I think that we sometimes diminish the motivation, not really increase the motivation of salespeople.
Yeah, and I think it is, again, especially because the world has changed, right? I mean, it could have worked for somebody who was supposed to be on the road for many months together, leaving the family because they had to sell from town to town and so on. I mean, I can imagine that it needed that extra incentive. I mean, what will make you get up in a motel every morning in a new motel and so on? I can understand that. Okay, at least I'm away from the family, but I'm providing for them a better life and so on. Today we are working from home, and I think this is something we really need to seriously rethink whether it has run its course, and we need to completely restructure the way sales folks are compensated. Let's move on, Deb. So the next part of this conversation is, how do we fix it?
Yeah, that's a big question. I don't know that without data, without solid alternatives, we know this works, I don't know that we'd ever convince sales organizations to move towards something else. I think that you're absolutely right that something needs to change. Perhaps it's that we pay salespeople differently, the way that others are paid. Perhaps it's that we incentivize the right way, not just the right results, and that we have clear penalties when people are dishonest in selling, when they don't have a certain level of conversions, when they don't have high marks from customers. There's got to be more than just that short-term brought in X amount of dollars today. But I don't have solid answers other than we all need to be more openly sharing, trying, experimenting, and making efforts, because we know what used to work no longer does work. There's plenty of evidence about that.
Absolutely. I will ask the same question, but with the overall context. How do we fix this terrible conversion rate problem that we have? And it's manifesting everywhere, right? It's manifesting with your quota, it's manifesting with your morale, it's manifesting with your numbers end of the day. There's no running away from it. You are trying something over and over. Like they say that you cannot keep digging in the same place expecting different results. So we are sort of doing that, which is in other ways a sign of insanity, right? That's what they say.
It is. It is. Well, and the answer is different for different job levels. You asked earlier about SDRs. So how do you increase the conversion rate from to get an appointment versus how do you increase the conversion rate to actually close a sale? I do think those are different answers. So let's start with the close the sale one. I think what I was saying earlier is highly likely to make a difference. And I say that now based on having worked with a few clients and seeing it in action. But just common sense tells you, if I'm the one who helps you make sense of something, I make it personal, I make it meaningful, I make it relevant, and I make it make sense. So I'm asking you the questions where you get self-discovery. Well, I am the one you are more likely to now trust and accept advice from and to rely on in a way that we've always imagined consultative selling and trusted advisor status would bring us. So I think more attention to sense making and stripping out excess information is extremely important. That may mean sacrificing quantity for quality. But if you want conversions, that almost always has to happen anyway.
Right.
When it comes to SDRs, it's a different answer. I think where SDRs often miss the mark is that they are so quantity focused that they lose all personalization. And I do think personalization still matters. They may not be having the conversations where they make sense out of something for the buyer, but they should be having the conversations where they make something personal and interesting for the buyer. SDRs need to work more on being interested and being seen as interested than in trying to spew something that will be interesting and hopefully hook one or two buyers into an appointment.
Yeah, and you wonder today, I mean, again, I was talking to someone and he said that if I had to find out details about a company, I had to dig out their annual report, and sometimes I had to actually write to some library for it to be shipped to me, which will take me weeks, if not months. Today, you have so much of information at a personal level about a person, about a company, it's just everywhere, and yet you do not do that. So it's sort of a mindset issue, which I suspect also trickles down. It rarely trickles up. The mindset problem that I need you to make 50 calls so that you can set up 5 appointments with the AE, and then you don't care whether that appointment is actually going to convert, because then it's the AE's problem. I need to give him the 5. I need to tell him end of the day, I've set up 5 appointments for you today, which is in ABCD days, or so on and so forth. So the question I wanted to ask was, when we are talking of conversion, one of the problems, and I just want your view on this, one of the problem of this lead to close is that most of the times we are going for a very low hanging fruit, so to say, which means you know that this person is out in the market, which also means five other vendors know that at the same time. And his intent is known because we get so much of intent data today, we need to use it. And we forget the nurturing part, which of course traditionally was supposed to be the marketing's job. But we as salespeople do not want to invest time. Even if I'm selling something which has a long sales cycle, I would rather try to sell it this quarter than engage with someone who I believe will buy next March.
Well, this fragmentation also forces us to bucket customers, our buyers, and then we treat them differently as opposed to having just human to human relationships with them. So this one's a MQL, and this one is a hot target, and we have all these different buckets that we put them into. I consider myself fortunate because my early sales career was in selling advertising, and I had a geographic territory, and every business in that geographic territory was my responsibility. I didn't have an SDR. I didn't have marketing sending me leads. I just had that couple of zip codes. And my manager would ask me questions every month. We'd look ahead. My manager would say, what progress have you made on your top targets? And, how are you going to meet your number? We had to have a certain number of active advertisers. How are you going to meet that number this month? So I was getting conditioned to have both short-term and long-term thinking. I was forced in that job to develop long-term relationships and to always be asking for referrals and new relationships. And it made me, I believe, a more well-rounded salesperson. It also forced me. I had to think about people in short-term, long-term, but I couldn't predetermine that. I had to get to know them first and understand their needs before I could then think in those terms.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think very interestingly, what you just described is essentially account-based marketing, which is what we are saying is the latest innovation, right?
Yes, we put new names on things and we act as if they're altogether different, but
yeah. So to wrap up this session, Deb, what would you recommend sales organizations do to actually make a difference to their rate of conversion? Because we all need to sell more. There is no two ways about it, or we'll go out of business. It's as simple as that. So if we have to be the ones who will survive and thrive, we need to do better. What would be your suggestion? Because I think your view, being from the buyer side, is very, very valuable.
Buyers want two-way dialogue. They want to be understood, and they want to have someone helping them sort out all the options. Someone they can trust, someone who isn't going to be rushed, someone who doesn't treat them like they're one of a million, but one of a kind. We, inside our own organizations, need to be having conversations about getting the right results the right way and supporting sellers for both. Actions drive results. So what are the actions that demonstrate the way we want to do business? Putting the customer first, not just saying that, but really doing that. And then we have to come down. We have to peel that onion back even more. Results come from actions. Actions come from beliefs. Why do you believe it's the right thing to get to know a customer and to spend time really nurturing that relationship? If you believe instead that you have to make short-term sales because that's what you hear every single morning in the rally that's happening inside your organization, in the pressure that you're getting, right? That belief fuels different actions and it will get different results. So we've got to create experiences that shape beliefs that get us the right results the right way, the way we've defined it for our brand and for those conversions, thinking long term, because that's really the only way that buyers are going to think.
That's great. Deb, thank you so much. As always, I learned a few things today, and I hope that when people listen to, so our objective is that we're going to put out all these interviews so that salespeople who are serious about their profession will take time to listen to these in its entirety. and benefit from it and make their notes and should be able to go and tell their leaders, you know what, I think you need to think about this and you need to answer these questions before I can go and answer some questions for you, right?
Yes. Yes. We can't keep doing the same thing. It's not working. And we all know it. Like you said, this is an elephant in the room. So let's get after it instead.
Deb, thank you so much.
Thank you, Subhanchan.